Good afternoon, everyone. How many of you go to museums? How many of you have been to the area museums? In Hampton Roads, we have some wonderful maritime museums, like the Mariners Museum and Nauticus in Norfolk. Many museum curators and educators, as well as archaeologists, such as Keith Muckleroy, David Gibbons, Jonathan Adams, Jim Doran, all state that archaeological context is very important in interpreting artifacts and bringing them to life in the museum experience. The Museum of Underwater Archaeology, run by archaeologist Kurt Nerl, even creates a teacher's kit of artifacts and instructions to help teachers show the students of the importance of where you find the artifacts. That meaning the stratigraphy within the ground of where you find them, not just the artifact itself. When treasure hunters remove single artifacts and destroy areas of the shipwrecker site, they are destroying the context of the artifact, making it impossible to interpret for education or museum display. Today I would like to persuade you that treasure hunting is detrimental to museums and the public and render artifacts useless to anyone but wealthy collectors. First, let's talk about what I mean when I say archaeological context. Archaeological context is a group of factors including physical location as well as the formation of context, what occurred in history to create this deposit. The physical location means the horizontal and vertical location of it within the soil. The formation means what occurred for that artifact to be placed in that position, what sediments came over it. So it's basically what happened in that artifact's life, its past, its present, its future. Now that we've looked at what archaeological context is, let's look at why archaeological context is important to archaeologists with an example. Archaeological context is important in an investigation because without knowing where precisely an artifact was found, archaeologists cannot decipher the history of that artifact and how it came to be buried. Here's an illustration of an archaeologist taking a level to look at the stratigraphy of this excavation. And you can see here he's using he's taking the horizontal plane and the vertical plane to map out this area. And that tells him where he found things and what came below it and what came above it. How many of you have dug in your backyard, maybe for a garden or some other home project? When you're digging with a shovel, you take out huge chunks of earth at a time, right? Now let's imagine that while you're digging in your backyard, you unearth a piece of pottery. It happens often enough in this area, certainly. I do it all the time in my backyard. Now, what can you tell me about this piece of pottery that you've unearthed? Its color, yes. Maybe even what type of pottery it is or where it's from if there's some sort of maker's mark. But you can't tell me what it was deposited in relation to because you've just dug it up in one shovelful. You can't tell me what was buried beneath it or what kind of sediments were on top of it or below it. Without knowing those things, you can't give me any precise information about the artifact. You could know what year it was made, but you couldn't tell me who used it, what year it was used, if it was reused by someone or used when it was made, those kind of things that make the interpretation of the artifact interesting for the public. Without that context, it's merely a broken piece of pottery. It has no greater meaning. Now that we've discussed why archaeological context is important to archaeologists, let's look at why archaeological context is important to us and you and the public in general. When you go to a museum, you will often see artifacts that tell you information about a culture or a group. In the previous example, all an archaeologist would be able to tell you about that piece of pottery is that it's a piece of pottery. Maybe they could be able to tell you, if it's porcelain or ceramic or stoneware, but that would basically be it. Now, when an archaeologist finds a piece of pottery on a site, they can tell you its rich history. They can tell you what culture was using it, if it was reused from something before, if it was placed in some sort of trash deposit, or if it was just a house deposit. They can give you a lot of information about that artifact and teach you about our history. Archaeologists would not be able to tell you any of that information if they didn't have the archaeological context. Where it lies is very important in interpreting that archaeological context. When treasure hunters excavate something, they go in and they just dig up whatever they want. They're looking for the most expensive artifact they can find that they can sell off. They often destroy entire portions of a site. Here is an example of a site map that an archaeologist would make. Having a site map like this you would be able to tell if an artifact was found here, or here, or here, or here, or anywhere on this wreck. And then you can interpret something about that artifact, where it was being used, what that means for shipboard life, what it was like to live on that ship. That small artifact could tell you that much about it. When a treasure hunter comes in, they're going to come in and blow all this away, looking for the most expensive thing in here that they could find, whether it's gold or an expensive artifact. When they come in and do that, they've turned that artifact from something that could be informative and educational for the public into something that's merely for a collector, someone very rich who wants an example of something from a shipwreck. They don't want to know any of its history, they just want the artifact. But for us, we want to go to a museum and have it interpreted for us and find out more about our history. That's why we go to museums, to learn more about our culture. Treasure hunters come and rip up sites and make artifacts that could educate us mere collectibles. Archaeologists, on the other hand, want to save this history for us, and the argument treasure hunters make is that they are preserving history for us while archaeologists are taking it away from us. But it's actually the opposite, because archaeologists are giving us that interpretation that we can learn from. In conclusion, I hope that I have shown you that treasure hunters are a detriment to our public education about history because they take away our opportunities to learn about the past and other cultures. Treasure hunters do this by destroying the archaeological context of a site. Archaeological context is the physical location that an artifact is found, the horizontal and vertical planes, and is also the formation of that context, how it became to be buried there. Archaeological context is important to archaeologists so that archaeologists can deduce information about artifacts and so that the public can learn more from artifacts, because without the context of an artifact, it just becomes meaningless. It's a mere collectible that really teaches us nothing beyond where it was made. Thank you for your time and attention today.